The mocking princess, the great hall of Velsia Palace, glimmered under 1,000 hanging crystal lights. The air was sweet with the smell of alien flowers, and the sound of music and laughter echoed from every corner. Nobles in long flowing robes of gold and silver stood in circles, whispering and glancing at the human who stood alone at the center. Daniel didn't belong here. And everyone knew it. He wore no jewels, no silken robe, just a plain black jacket and boots worn from travel. Compared to the aliens around him, with their elegant crowns and delicate markings on their skin, he looked almost ordinary, almost on the raised throne at the far end of the hall. Princess Lyra watched him with a smirk curling on her lips. Her gown shimmered like starlight, and the crown of living vines on her head pulsed faintly with bioluminescent light. Her beauty was undeniable, sharp eyes, the color of molten gold, hair like a river of silver. But her voice, when it rang out, was colder than the air between stars. "So," she said, her tone dripping with mockery, "this is the human my father invited to our court? You have no crest, no heritage, no bloodline worthy of a name. Tell me, Daniel, what do you think you can offer the house of Velsia?" The hall fell silent. Daniel met her gaze. His dark eyes didn't waver, even as the crowd shifted uncomfortably, waiting for him to speak. He could have told them about the things he'd done, the dangers he'd survived, the skills no one in this room could match. But he, DN, single quotes. Instead, he said quietly, "I came to help, not to impress." Lyra's laughter was like a blade. "Help. A man with no lineage believes he can stand among us and offer help." She rose from her throne, stepping down with slow, graceful movements. The circle of nobles widened as she approached him. "You are nothing in this court. Less than nothing. You should remember your place." Somewhere in the back, someone chuckled. Someone else muttered bold words from a rootless wanderer. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. A small, knowing smile ghosted across his lips, but it wasn't arrogance, it was something quieter. Something Lyra couldn't read. She didn't like that. "You will leave tomorrow," she said flatly, "and take your unremarkable self with you." The music started again. Conversations returned. But a few curious eyes lingered on the human, who didn't bow, didn't flinch, and didn't look ashamed. That night, as the palace slept, Daniel stood alone on one of the outer balconies. From here, he could see the sprawl of Velsia City below, shimmering towers, sky bridges glowing with pale blue light, ships drifting silently between them like fireflies. Behind him, footsteps. "You're still here," said a voice. It wasn't Lyra's, it was Kale. Her personal guarda, tall alien with deep blue skin and the expression of a man who'd seen too much war. "I don't sleep much," Daniel said. Kale studied him for a moment. "You didn't defend yourself today?" "Didn't need to," Daniel replied. The guard tilted his head. Most men, when insulted by the princess, try to win her respect. Daniel looked back at the city lights. Respect isn't something you win with words. Kale's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, maybe the faintest glimmer of understanding. "Be careful, human. This court, it eats people alive." Daniel's only answer was a faint smile. By morning, the sky over Velsia was painted in deep purple clouds. The palace gates were opening for the day when a sudden, sharp alarm shattered the calm. "Raiders?" Someone shouted. Dot from the horizon. Dark shapes emerge, sleek. Black ships moving in tight formation, too fast to be friendly. The palace defense towers began to glow, charging weapons, but the raiders fired first. Beams of crimson light sliced across the sky. Explosions shook the walls. Inside the grand courtyard, guards scrambled. Servants screamed. Nobles ran for cover. Daniel was already moving. He found Lyra near the main steps. her guards shielding her as one of the raider ships descended low, weapons targeting the palace gates. "Get her to safety," someone yelled. But before they could move, a blast hit the ground near them. The shockwave knocked Lyra off her feet. The guards were thrown aside. Smoke and dust filled the air. Through the chaos, Daniel appeared, grabbing Lyra by the arm and pulling her up. She looked at him in disbelief. No time," he cut in. "Move." Another blast hit close, showering them with fragments of stone. Daniel shoved her behind a column, shielding her from the debris with his own body. When the dust cleared, Lyra was staring at him, really staring at him for the first time. There was no fear in his eyes, no hesitation, just calm focus. He turned his head toward the sky, watching the raider ships wheel around for another pass. "This isn't over," he muttered, and in that moment, for reasons she couldn't explain, the princess who had mocked him hours ago felt a sharp twist of uncertainty. Forced Alista courtyard was chaos. Alarms wailed through the palace, echoing like a heartbeat of war. Raider ships circled overhead, their black hulls reflecting the purple sky. The smell of burning stone and metal filled the air. Daniel kept one hand on Lyra's arm as they darted through the shattered gardens. The once perfect crystal fountains were now piles of broken shards, their glowing waters spilling across the marble floors. "Why are you even here?" Lyra shouted over the noise. She stumbled slightly, unused to running in her heavy ceremonial gown. "Saving your life," Daniel answered without looking back. She nearly laughed, even in the middle of danger. "I didn't ask you to. You didn't have to." A roar tore through the air as one of the raider ships came in low, opening its side hatch. Several armored figures leaped out, landing with weapons ready. Their armor was jagged, black with glowing red lines like something built for nightmares. The leader pointed straight at Lyra. "Alive." He barked in a guttural alien tongue before the princess could react. Daniel pulled her down behind the wreck of a transport skimmer. A blaster bolt seared past where her head had been a second earlier, melting part of the wall behind them. Lyra's breath came fast. "You're going to get killed." Daniel ignored her, scanning the enemy's positions. "Not if you follow my lead. You're ordering me." Her voice was sharp, but there was something underneath it, fear. He didn't answer. Instead, he yanked a small metal sphere from his jacket pocket, pressed a button, and tossed it over the skimmer. It hit the ground, rolled once, exploded in a burst of blinding white light. The raiders stumbled, their visors flickering. Daniel grabbed Lyra's hand. "Run." They sprinted through the palace's side gate, the roar of battle behind them. Daniel led her into the stables where a sleek, silver-winged skiff rested. It was smaller than a royal transport, but fast. Lyra hesitated. "That's not even armed." "Then we don't get shot for stealing it," Daniel said, climbing into the pilot's seat. "Get in." She climbed in, reluctantly. "Insane." "That's not the first time I've heard that," he muttered. Activating the controls, the skiff's wings unfolded with a hiss, and in seconds they shot into the open sky. Wind tore at Lyra's hair as the city shrank below them. For a moment, she thought they might escape. Then the raider ship spotted them. Two black fighters broke formation, engines flaring as they gave chase. Daniel pushed the skiff harder, weaving between the jagged rock spires that rose out of the landscape. Energy blasts lit the sky around them. "You're going to crash," Lyra shouted. "Not yet," Daniel said, jaw tight. One blast skimmed the left wing, sending the skiff spinning. Daniel fought the controls, but smoke poured from the rear engine. "They're hurting us," he said grimly. "Hurting us where?" He pointed ahead past the last mountain ridge. A massive storm swirled, its clouds the color of blood. Forks of lightning leaped between the clouds and the jagged cliffs below. "We can't go into that." Lyra said, panic in her voice. It's the only way to lose them, he replied. The skiff dove into the storm. Winds slammed into them. Lightning flashed so close Lyra could feel the heat against her skin. The controls shook violently under Daniel's hands. The raider ships followed. For a moment, then pulled away. No one sane would stay in a storm like this. We're not going to make it. Lyra yelled. Daniel's eyes flicked over the displays. We'll make it. Hold on. Blinding flash lit the cockpit, and then the world spun. The skiff dropped fast, engines screaming. Daniel tried to slow their descent, but a final burst of lightning struck the wing. The craft tore through the clouds and slammed into something hard. Everything went black. When Lyra woke, she was lying on cold ground. The storm above was gone, replaced by a sky full of strange, glowing plants and twisted, jagged rocks. Her head ached. Somewhere nearby, water dripped steadily. She turned her head and saw Daniel, already on his feet, checking the wrecked skiff. His jacket was torn and a deep gash ran down his left arm. But he didn't seem to notice. You're awake, he said, without looking at her. Where are we? She asked. Not on Velsia anymore. He glanced up at the alien jungle around. Them looks like one of the moons, not charted. We're alone. She pushed herself up, heart pounding. We have to get back. My father, Daniel, cut her off. We won't last a day here without shelter. Lyra's jaw tightened. I don't take orders from humans. Then you can take them from someone who just saved you twice today, he said, his voice calm but firm. For a moment, their eyes locked. She hated the fact that, deep inside, a part of her agreed with him. They worked in silence for hours, salvaging what they could from the skiff. The air was heavy and damp. Strange noises echoed through the jungle, low, rumbling growls, and the distant crack of something huge moving. When night fell, the plants around them began to glow brighter, bathing the clearing in eerie green light. As Lyra sat by the small fire Daniel built, she watched him from the corner of her eye. He moved with quiet purpose, every action measured. No wasted effort, no panic. Finally, she spoke. Why did you save me? Daniel didn't look up. Atas. Leaving you behind wasn't an option. She frowned. You don't even like me. I don't have to like someone to do what's right, he said simply. Lyra was silent for a long moment, the firelight flickering across her golden eyes. For the first time, she wondered if she had been wrong about him. Asterisk, the moon of trials. The jungle around them never slept. Even in the dim glow of alien plants, shapes moved just out of sight, slithering, climbing, watching. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and strange pollen that made Lyra's nose itch. Daniel rose before the first pale light touched the jagged horizon. He didn't wake her, but the sound of his quiet movements pulled her from restless dreams. She watched him as he checked his gear, tested the edge of his blade, and scanned the tree line. You're up early, she murmured. He didn't look at her. We move at first light. The skiff's beacon might still be working. If raiders pick it up before rescue does, we're dead. Lyra frowned. You talk like you've been hunted before. He glanced over his shoulder, just for a second. I have. There was no boast in his voice, only fact. She didn't press him. They packed what little they had: a water filter, a coil of rope, 2 ration packs, and a small flare gun with only 1 charge. Daniel led the way, moving like he could read the land just by looking at it. Lyra followed, careful to step where he stepped. After an hour, she began to notice things she hadn't before: scratches high up on the trees, claw marks on rocks, strange, wide footprints in the mud. Something big lives here, she whispered. Several somethings, Daniel replied. Keep quiet. They crossed a shallow stream, its water glowing faintly blue in the shade. The sound of it masked the first growl, but the second was closer, low, deep, and rumbling through the ground under their feet. Daniel stopped. Slowly, he slid the blade from his belt. Up the rock. Now, she hesitated. Why? Because it's faster than you, he said without looking back. A shape emerged from the undergrowth, a massive beast with 6 legs, a body covered in rough plates, and a head like a snapping serpent. Its eyes glowed the same pale blue as the water it saw them. It charged. Lyra scrambled up the rock, heart hammering. She reached the top just as the beast crashed into the stone, claws scraping, jaws snapping inches from Daniel's leg. Daniel didn't run. He moved sideways, drawing the creature away from her. Every time it lunged, he shifted just enough to avoid the strike, his blade flashing in the green light. He wasn't trying to kill it, just keep it back. Finally, he spotted an opening. When the beast lunged again, Daniel twisted aside and drove the blade into a joint between its armor plates. The creature shrieked, a sound that rattled the leaves, then crashed back into the undergrowth and was gone. Daniel wiped the blade on a leaf and looked up at her. "You all right?" She nodded, still catching her breath. You fought. It like you knew exactly where to strike." "I did," he said simply, climbing up to her. "Where I grew up, there were worse things than that." They moved again, slower this time. Lyra kept glancing at him, replaying the fight in her mind. She had seen warriors trained since birth, but none had moved like him. No wasted effort. No hesitation. By midday, the jungle gave way to sharp cliffs. From here, they could see the whole valley, a stretch of green, broken by glowing rivers and strange rock towers. Somewhere in that expanse, the beacon signal might be calling. But Daniel's eyes narrowed. Smoke. There. Lyra followed his gaze. Thin threads of black smoke curled from deep in the valley. "Campfires?" she asked. "Too many," he replied. "Could be raiders. Could be worse. We'll go around." The long way took them into the shadow of the cliffs. The air was cooler here, but the silence was heavier. A sudden crack echoed through the air. Daniel shoved her against the rock wall just before a spear slammed into the ground where she had been standing. Figures appeared above a group of alien hunters, their faces painted, their armor made of bone and hide. They didn't speak her language, but their meaning was clear. "Your prey." Daniel raised a hand slowly, showing it empty. "We're just passing through." The hunters didn't lower their weapons. One jumped down, landing between them and the path ahead. Before Lyra could react, Daniel stepped forward. He spoke in a language she had never heard before, short, clipped words that made the hunters freeze. The lead hunter's eyes narrowed. Then, slowly, he lowered his spear. He barked something to the others, and they melted back into the shadows of the cliffs. Lyra stared at Daniel. "What was that?" "A dialect," he said, starting forward again. "Close to a language I learned years ago. You've been here before?" "No." He glanced at her. "But I've been places like it." That night, they found a narrow cave high in the cliffs. From its mouth, they could see the moons hanging low, their pale light spilling over the valley. Lyra sat near the fire, watching the flames dance. Daniel sat on the other side, sharpening his blade. Finally, she spoke. "When I mocked you, I thought you were just another arrogant outsider. But now?" She trailed off, unsure how to finish. Daniel didn't look up. "You thought I was?" "Nothing. It's fine. I'm used to that." "It's not fine," she said quietly. "I was wrong." For the first time since they met, he looked at her. There was no anger in his eyes, only a strange, unreadable calm. "Sleep," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be harder." And somehow, Lyra knew he was right. The enemy's truth. The next morning, the jungle air was colder than before. A thin mist curled between the trees, and every sound seemed sharper, every branch cracked louder. Daniel's movements were quick, quiet, precise. He knew they weren't alone. They had been walking for less than an hour when Daniel stopped suddenly, crouched, pressing his palm into the damp earth. "Tracks," he said. Lyra looked over his shoulder. "Animal?" "No," Daniel said, his tone heavy. "Boots." "4, no, 5 people, armed, moving fast." Lyra's brows knitted. Could they be from the palace? Sent to find us? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He stared into the fog ahead, listening. Then he spoke, low and certain. "If they are from the palace, they're not here to rescue you." They moved carefully, staying off the main trail. The ground sloped downward into a narrow ravine where the mist was thick enough to hide them. Lyra kept her questions to herself, but her heart pounded. She didn't want to believe that anyone from her father's court would harm her, but deep down, she already suspected it happened quickly. A shout cut through the mist. A blaster bolt struck the rock beside Daniel's head, sending sparks across his cheek. He grabbed Lyra's wrist and pulled her into the ravine. Figures emerged above them, 5 alien soldiers in black and silver armor, their helmets marked with the sigil of House Valsia, Lyra's house. She froze. "Those are I know," Daniel said, already moving. "Keep your head down." The soldiers fired again. Daniel pulled Lyra behind a fallen log, returning fire with the small blaster he'd taken from the wreck. He aimed low, forcing them to duck back. "What are they doing?" Lyra whispered, her voice shaking. "They're my father's men." Daniel's voice was cold. "No, they're someone's men, and that someone doesn't want you alive." When the soldiers regrouped, Daniel grabbed her hand. "Move." They ran deeper into the ravine, splashing through a shallow stream. Energy bolts hissed past. One, grazing Lyra's sleeve and burning the fabric. They reached a rocky overhang, and Daniel shoved her inside. "Stay here." "Wait, where are you going?" she demanded. "To end this," he said, and before she could stop him, he was gone. Lyra crouched low, her heart in her throat. She heard muffled shouts, the sound of scuffling, and then silence. Moments later, Daniel returned alone. "They won't follow us," he said. She stared at him. "You killed them." "No." His voice was flat. "But they won't be." Walking for a while, they pressed on, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the ambush site. By midday, the jungle thinned, opening into a high plateau. From here, they could see the fractured remains of an ancient structured all spires, half buried in the earth, glowing faintly in the sunlight. "What is this place?" Lyra asked. Daniel paused, his eyes scanning the carvings on the walls. Older than your empire. Maybe older than humanity's arrival in this part of space." She ran her fingers along the strange symbols etched into the stone. "I've never seen this script before." Daniel hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I have." Lyra turned to him sharply. "How?" For a moment, he looked like he might ignore the question. Then, slowly, he said, "When I was young, my home was destroyed. Raiders, worse than the ones we saw. I was taken in by a people far from here. They weren't human. They taught me how to survive, how to fight, and how to read this." "Why would they teach you that?" she asked, puzzled. "Because it's a warning," Daniel said, tracing one of the symbols. "This place was part of a war long before. Your royal line existed. It was destroyed from within." Something in his tone made Lyra's stomach twist. "From within, like the palace." Daniel didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said enough. As the sun dipped low, they made camp. Inside the ruins, the broken walls shielded them from the wind, and Daniel lit a small fire. Lyra sat across from him, watching the flames dance across his features. "You think someone in my father's court ordered the attack?" she said. "I know they did," Daniel replied without looking up. "The raiders were a distraction. Those soldiers today, they came to finish the job." Her hands clenched in her lap. "But why?" "Power," Daniel said simply. "If you're gone, someone else inherits your position. Someone who might be easier to control." Lyra felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "You're saying my life means nothing to them?" Daniel's eyes met hers. "It means everything to the people who want you dead." Silence hung between them for a moment, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Lyra looked away, her thoughts racing. She had mocked Daniel, called him rootless and unworthy. But here he was, the only one standing between her and death. Later, that night, as Daniel kept watch, Lyra found herself speaking softly into the darkness. "Back in the palace, I saw T were just another man trying to gain favor. I didn't think you were useful." Daniel offered, not unkindly. She hesitated. Real. For the first time, Daniel's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "Get some rest. We've got a long way to go." Lyra lay back against the cool stone, but sleep didn't come quickly. Her mind kept circling back to the same thought: if Daniel was telling the truth, then the real danger wasn't the jungle or the raiders, or even the beasts that stalked them. It was her own people. Asterisk returned to the Empire, the moon's pale light faded behind them as Daniel and Lyra stepped aboard the battered supply shuttle they had found hidden in the ruins. The engine coughed like an old animal, but it carried them into the dark between worlds. For hours, neither spoke. Lyra sat in the co-pilot's chair, watching the stars slip past. Her father's palace waited ahead. So did questions, whispers, and danger. When the blue-white marble of Velsia filled the viewport, she exhaled slowly. "Home," she murmured. Daniel didn't answer. His jaw was tight, eyes fixed on the spaceport lights below. He knew home wasn't safe. The moment they landed in the royal hangar, Lyra was swept up by a crowd of servants and guards. Her father. The Emperor was not present. Only courtiers with polite smiles and sharp eyes. "Your Highness, we feared the worst," one court official said with a bow. "It is a miracle you've returned." "It was not a miracle," Lyra said coldly, glancing at Daniel. "It was him." Some turned to look at the human standing at the base of the ramp. His plain clothes were still torn from the jungle. His boots were caked in dried mud. He didn't bow. A nobleman with pale skin marked in silver tattoos stepped forward, looking Daniel up and down with clear disdain. "This is the one who kept you alive." "Yes," Lyra replied, her voice steady. The nobleman gave a thin smile. "How curious. Our princess, rescued by a man with no lineage." His tone dripped with mockery. "Tell me, human, do you think saving her makes you her equal?" The hangar grew quiet. Daniel's voice was calm. "No. Saving her makes me someone she can trust." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. The nobleman's smile faded. "Perhaps you would like to test your worth in a duel." Lyra stepped forward sharply. "That's not necessary. I accept," Daniel said. Before she could finish, the noble's eyes lit with satisfaction. By evening, the training hall was crowded. Courtiers lined the balcony, eager for a spectacle. The duel would be fought with traditional weapons: curved twin blades for the Valsians, a single long sword for Daniel. Lyra stood at the edge of the ring, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. The noble Lord Varish bowed with mocking grace. "Don't worry, princess. I'll make it quick for your companion." Daniel said nothing. When the gong sounded, Varish moved first, his twin blades flashing in tight arcs. He was fast blindingly so, but Daniel sidestepped each strike. His sword held low, eyes never leaving his opponent. The crowd jeered. "Fight him, human. Varish lunged again, aiming for Daniel's throat. Daniel pivoted, his blade knocking. One of Varesh's aside. The sound rang sharp in the air. Varish stumbled a half-dash step. Daniel struck not to kill, but to disarm. One of the noble's blades clattered to the floor. Gasps rose from the crowd. Varesh's face twisted. "You think this proves anything?" "It proves you're loud," Daniel replied evenly. Enraged, Varish attacked in a flurry, forcing Daniel back toward the ring's edge. At the last second, Daniel dropped low, sweeping Varesh's legs from under him. The noble hit the floor hard, his remaining blade skidding away. Silence fell. Daniel stepped back, lowering his sword. "Yield, gracious?" Eyes burned with fury, but he said the word through clenched teeth. "Yield." That night, whispers ran through the palace corridors. Some said the human had humiliated one of the finest duelists in the court. Others whispered that perhaps the princess's trust in him was not misplaced. In Lyra's chambers, she paced in front of the window. "You shouldn't have done that." "Why?" Daniel asked from where he leaned against the wall. "Because now every noble who feels insulted will come after you. They'll think you're challenging the old order." Daniel shrugged. "Maybe I am." Lyra stopped, turning to face him. "You don't understand how dangerous that is." "I do," he said quietly. "And I also understand that the people who tried to have you killed will try again." "I'm not here to play politics, Lyra. I'm here to keep you alive." Her eyes softened. "Why? Why go this far?" Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "Because where I come from, you protect the people who stand beside you even if they didn't start out as friends." She didn't know what to say to that. The next morning, the emperor summoned Lyra to the throne room. Daniel walked behind her, ignoring the glares from the nobles lining the great hall. The emperor's voice was deep and measured. "My daughter tells me you saved her life." Daniel bowed his head slightly. "I did what I could." "Oh, and you fought one of my lords last night?" "Yes." The emperor studied him for a long, silent moment. A man without lineage, without title. "And yet you stand in my court as if you belong here." Daniel met his gaze evenly. "I'm not here to belong, Your Majesty. I'm here to finish what's been started." A flicker of something approval maybe passed in the emperor's eyes. But his words were careful. "Then you should know. The storm around you is growing." Daniel nodded once. "I've weathered worse." Lyra looked between them, a strange unease settling in her chest. She could feel it. The palace was a battlefield now. And Daniel had just stepped into the center of it. The unthinkable alliance. Warning came at dawn. A palace guard burst into Lyra's chambers, his voice shaking. "Your Highness, the outer cities are burning. Enemy warships have entered orbit." Daniel was already at the door, pulling on his jacket. "Whose ships?" The guard hesitated. "House Vareth and their allies." Lyra's eyes widened. "Vareth. He's the noble you beat in the duel," Daniel finished grimly. "Guess he didn't take it well." Within an hour, the palace was a fortress. Defense towers rose from hidden compartments, shield generators hummed, and soldiers filled the courtyards. From the balcony, Lyra could see the city below, a chaos of flashing sirens and fleeing civilians. Daniel stood with the emperor and the generals in the war room. The holographic table glowing with red enemy markers. "They've breached the outer ring," a general said. "If they take the east wall, the palace will fall within the hour." "Pull the civilians into the lower districts," Daniel said, his voice steady. "And reroute power from the east gardens to the wall cannons." The general stared at him. "You have no rank here, human." Daniel didn't blink. "Do it, or you'll be dead before you finish arguing." Silence filled the room. Then the emperor nodded. "Do as he says." Minutes later, Daniel was in the courtyard, strapping on armor borrowed from the palace armory. It didn't fit perfectly, but it would do. Lyra approached, her golden eyes bright with fear. "You're going out there," he said simply. "You're not a soldier of my house. I'm not fighting for your house," he replied. "I'm fighting for you." Her breath caught. "Why?" He glanced at her then, and his answer was quiet but firm. "Because somewhere between the jungle and now, you stopped being a job." She didn't have time to respond. The alarm blared, signaling that the east wall was under attack. The battle was a blur of smoke and fire. Daniel moved through it like a shadow, directing troops, pulling the wounded to safety, and striking where the enemy lines were weakest. Sword cut through Vareth's soldiers with deadly precision. Lyra, dressed in lighter armor, fought beside him. At first, the soldiers stared in shock at their princess in battle, but her skill with a spear silenced any doubt. Daniel covered her flank, his back always to hers. Their movements instinctively in sync. An explosion shook the ground, and part of the east wall collapsed. Enemy troops poured through the breach. "We hold here," Daniel shouted. They fought until their arms ached, until smoke burned their lungs. Then, from the dust, Vareth himself emerged, his armor, black and gold. His face twisted with triumph. "You think you can steal my honor, human?" Vareth snarled. "I will kill you and take the princess as my prize." Daniel stepped forward, blade ready. "Come and try." The duel was fierce. Vareth fought with rage, his strikes heavy and wild. Daniel's movements were precise, each parry a measured answer to the noble's fury. Lyra circled, keeping enemy soldiers at bay so no one could interfere. Finally, Vareth lunged, leaving his side exposed. Daniel seized the opening, twisting his blade and sending Vareth crashing to the ground. He pressed the tip to the noble's throat. "Yield," Daniel said. Vareth spat at his feet. Daniel didn't kill him, but he slammed the hilt of his sword into Vareth's helmet, knocking him unconscious. Around them, the enemy troops hesitated, then began to retreat as palace reinforcements poured in. The east wall was safe for now. That night, the palace was quiet except for the distant hum of repair drones. Daniel sat alone in the courtyard, cleaning his sword. His armor lay beside him, scorched and dented. Lyra approached, her steps soft. "You saved the palace." He shook his head. "We saved it." She hesitated, then sat beside him. For a long moment, they didn't speak. The night air was cool, and the stars above shimmered like a sea of diamonds. Finally, she said, "When I first met you, I thought you were nothing. A man with no name, no house, no history. But today, I saw you lead my people. I saw you fight for them. I saw you fight for me." Daniel's eyes met hers, and there was no mockery in her voice. Now only truth. She took a deep breath. "I was wrong about you, completely." For a moment, neither moved. Then she reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. "Daniel, stay. Not just as my protector, as my ally." Daniel looked at her, his expression unreadable. But there was something in his eyes, something warm, something dangerous. "Lyra," he said softly, "I already made that choice." From mockery to majesty, years had passed since the battle for the palace. The galaxy had changed. Borders had shifted, old rivalries had burned away, and new alliances had formed. And at the center of it all stood two figures: Queen Lyra of Velsia, and Daniel, the human once mocked for having no name. The great throne room, once a place of whispered insults and cold glances, now echoed with a different sound: respect. Nobles bowed low as the couple entered, their twin crowns catching the light. On the steps below them, two children waited, a boy and a girl, their skin a perfect blend of alien gold and human warmth. Their eyes, like molten sunlight, scanned the court with calm confidence. These children were heirs, not just to a throne, but to a new age. It hadn't been easy. After Vareth's defeat, the enemies of the crown did not vanish. There were more. Battlesome fought with weapons, others with words. Daniel became the queen's right hand, her military commander, and, eventually, a chosen consort. Some nobles had protested loudly. A man with no lineage cannot sit beside the queen. Daniel didn't waste time arguing. He proved himself in the only way that mattered by keeping the kingdom safe. He trained soldiers, outmaneuvered pirates, and negotiated with alien leaders that even Lyra's father had failed to sway. Every victory silenced more voices by the time Lyra's father passed the crown to her. There were no more whispers-only cheers. On the day of her coronation, Lyra had looked out over the sea of faces and spoken words that shook the empire. "This man beside me," she said, taking Daniel's hand, "was once mocked for having no bloodline. I was the first to mock him. But bloodline does not decide worth, actions do. Courage does. Honor does." The hall had roared in agreement. From that day forward, Daniel was no longer the human with no name. He was the king consort of Velsia, the guardian of the crown, and the man whose children would inherit a united throne. Now, in the quiet moments between state affairs, Daniel would sometimes walk the palace gardens with Lyra, their fingers loosely intertwined. The gardens were different now, no longer reserved only for the highest bloodlines. Citizens from all walks of life could visit on certain days, a change Lyra had insisted on. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange, and Violet Lyra paused by the fountain. "Do you remember," she asked softly, "the first words I said to you in this palace?" Daniel smirked. "You have no bloodline, no noble name. You are nothing. Hard to forget." She winced, then laughed quietly. "I was such a fool. You were a princess raised in a world that believed bloodlines mattered more than deeds," he said gently. "You've changed that world." "No," she said, looking up at him. "We changed it." The changes went beyond Velsia. Under their joint rule, human and alien systems began trading freely. Joint defense fleets formed, mixing species that had once distrusted each other. Daniel's military reforms spread beyond the empire, earning him recognition far from their homeworld. Their children grew in this world of unity. The boy, Kale, trained with the palace guard, quick to smile but fierce in battle. The girl, Saren, showed the sharp mind of a diplomat, her words already winning over stubborn elders. They were proof that Lineage was not about blood, it was about the future you built. One evening, a council envoy arrived from a distant system. He was a proud man, draped in silks, and when introduced to Daniel, he hesitated before speaking. "It is rare," the envoy said slowly, "for a human to rise so high in an alien empire." Daniel only smiled. "It was rare," he corrected. "Now, it's just the way things are." The envoy bowed low, a gesture of genuine respect. Lyra, watching from the throne, felt the same twist of emotion she had felt years ago in the jungle when she had seen Daniel stand between her and death. Back then, it had been surprise. Now, it was pride. The years rolled on, when the great interstellar summit was held, bringing together rulers from across the known galaxy. It was their children who represented Velsia. Kale and Saren walked into the chamber wearing their blended royal crests, heads high, voices steady in the closing session. Saren's words echoed across the hall. "My parents built this future from nothing. One was born to a throne, the other was told he was nothing. Together, they proved that destiny is not given, it's made." The chamber erupted in applause. That night, on the balcony overlooking the city, Lyra leaned against Daniel's shoulder. The city below sparkled like the stars above. "You know," she said, "there's still one thing I regret." Daniel glanced at her. "What's that?" "That I didn't see you for who you were sooner." He chuckled. "If you had, you might not have insulted me in front of an entire court." She smiled. "And then you wouldn't have had a reason to prove me wrong." They stood in comfortable silence, watching their children in the gardens below, laughing together under the twin moons. From the palace to the farthest colonies, people knew their story, not as a tale of a queen and her consort, but as the legend of a human once mocked for having no lineage whose descendants now ruled the stars. And in the quiet of that balcony, Daniel whispered the same words he had told her years ago. "In the ruins of that dangerous moon, you protect the people who stand beside you." Lyra's hand tightened around his. "Always," she said.